Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're unpacking a really foundational and honestly kind of provocative concept from Chapter 1 of Xavier Chetiamong's book, Stop Chasing Shadows. This text, it challenges so much of what we assume about drive, ambition, and why we sometimes trip up right when we're trying our absolute hardest to move forward. We're going to look at the invisible forces that dictate our success, and more importantly, our failures. So get ready, because this is literally going to change how you look at your daily routines.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Have you ever fallen into a ditch in broad daylight? Seriously, I want you to literally picture that for a second. The sun's shining, there are no shadows obscuring your path, you definitely aren't blindfolded, and yet, bam, you end up in a hole in the ground. Sounds almost comical, right? I mean, we tend to think that as long as we can clearly see where we're going, we're totally safe. But the author opens Chapter 1 with a story that proves this isn't always the case. And the reason why is just absolutely fascinating.
So, the author shares this highly relatable personal anecdote from his time at Ahmadu Bello University. It was a fateful afternoon, and normally he was a very punctual guy. But on this specific day, his alarm rang and like so many of us, he snoozed it. Realizing he was running super late, he bolted out of his room. He actually describes it as rushing out like a bullet shot from the nozzle of a gun. He was just so intensely focused on getting to class that he completely missed the ditch right in front of him. He fell, screaming ouch, and badly bruised his left shin. It was a physical scar that served as a permanent reminder of a powerful life lesson. He wasn't blind, it wasn't dark, so why on earth did he fall?
Well, this brilliantly illustrates the sequence of our daily failures. Let's break down the anatomy of this fall. Step 1, he looked at the clock, meaning he received a piece of information. Step 2, armed with the really good intention of not being late to class, he rushed. His energy and vigor spiked. And Step 3, because of that extreme energetic rush, he completely ignored an obvious ditch. Think about the sheer absurdity of this. His energetic rush, which was fueled entirely by good intentions, completely blinded him to an obvious physical obstacle. And the kicker? He ultimately arrived at class even later and injured.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the philosophical pivot. The ditch wasn't actually the real problem. The real problem was the rush. And what caused the rush? The clock. Or rather, the information provided by the clock. The author writes that every force of distraction is built from a piece of information. Just let that sink in for a moment. We usually think of distractions as, video games, social media, a noisy room. But distraction, at its very core, originates from the information we choose to internalize and act upon.
This brings us to Section 1, the root of distraction.
You see, when we pursue our goals, we usually assume that having a ton of vigor and energy is purely a positive thing. But Chetiamong argues that this very energy can actually become our biggest source of distraction if it's fueled by panic-inducing information. To hammer this point home, Chapter 1 quotes the famous fictional Wall Street titan, Gordon Gekko, who said, "The most valuable commodity I know of is information." Whether you're trading stocks or just trying to navigate a university campus, information is the invisible currency driving human action. It dictates our pace, our direction, our emotional state. It's the spark that lights the fire of our ambitions, but it's also the blinder that can cause us to stumble.
Moving on to Section 2, the true nature of information.
If information is really this powerful, we need to completely rethink what it actually is. It's not just words on a page or data on a spreadsheet. Information is a transient system that actually has life. Yes, life. Why? Because humans are its true carriers. We often mistake the internet for the carrier of information, but the author clarifies that the internet merely stores the thoughts and works of man. For as long as human beings live, information lives within us. It animates us. It makes us rush out of doors like bullets. And when you realize that you are the living, breathing carrier of the information you consume, you start to treat what you let into your mind with a whole lot more reverence.
Which leads us right into Section 3, success versus fulfillment.
So, if we're animated by the information we carry, what happens when we let the wrong information guide our lives? Well, it leads to a crisis of purpose. People will do almost anything to be successful, but very few end up truly fulfilled. The author draws a really sharp distinction here. Success is simply achieving a goal, like finally getting to that class, even if you're bruised and bleeding. But fulfillment? That is entirely different. Fulfillment, according to the text, comes from executing God's purpose for your life, your unique assignment. Success can exist entirely without fulfillment, but true fulfillment requires that your success is aligned with your ultimate purpose. If you're operating on the wrong information, you might successfully sprint right to the bitter end of the wrong path.
And finally, Section 4, the path to success.
So how do we actually avoid the ditches and achieve success that brings fulfillment? The author gives us a really clear answer: acquiring the right information. Take these super relatable examples from the text. A student wants good grades, a civil servant wants a promotion, singles want a great relationship, and married couples want a thriving marriage. It doesn't matter what the specific goal is, the underlying requirement is identical. Every single one of these people relies entirely on acquiring the proper information to succeed. You can't just stumble your way into a successful marriage or a huge promotion purely by chance or by blind rushing. You absolutely have to know what you're doing.
So, the crucial point here is this deeply empathetic reframing of failure. A student fails an exam not because they're dull or inherently flawed. They fail simply because they didn't know enough to pass. That's it. It's a lack of information, not a lack of innate intelligence. The author reminds us that no one in their right mind sees a ditch and consciously decides to walk into it just to get injured. We fall because we lack the information of where the ditch is, or we allow the information of panic to distract us from seeing it. As we wrap up this explainer on Chapter 1 of Stop Chasing Shadows, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. What ditches are you currently rushing toward? Seriously, where in your life are you running like a bullet, driven by the anxiety of the clock and completely blind to the obstacles right in front of you? I encourage you to just pause today. Evaluate the information you're carrying. Is it pushing you toward mere frantic success, or is it guiding you carefully toward true fulfillment? Stop rushing blindly. Stop chasing shadows. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope you use this to navigate your path just a little more clearly today.